This is a captions test. This is a captions test. This is a captions test.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Yonge North Subway Extension Virtual Open House. My name is Azim Ahmed, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for tonight. I'm on the Community Relations team on the Yonge North Subway Extension for Metrolinx. On behalf of Metrolinx, I'd like to welcome everyone participating online this evening for the alignment-wide Virtual Open House for the Yonge North Subway Extension, or YNSC. Tonight will serve as an update on the project, but also as an introduction to the environmental studies that are just beginning. And as we begin, we'd also like to acknowledge some of our special guests in attendance here tonight, representing the communities. We have Mayor Scarpadia Markham, Mayor Bevilacqua Vaughan, and Acting Mayor DePaula of Richmond Hill here today. Also, we have Councillor Irish from Thornhill Markham, Councillor Godwin Chan from Richmond Hill, and Councillor Sheffman from Vaughan. Thank you all for being here and your continued interest and feedback on this project. I'd like to remind everyone that Metrolinx is committed to engaging with and informing our neighbors, customers, and the community about our progress as we embark on designing and building this important rapid transit project that will make it faster and more convenient for folks to travel between York Region and Toronto. We do invite all your feedback regarding our services and our projects, and I want to thank you again for your interest in joining here today. Important note, this event is being closed captioned, so to use this feature, please enable it on your video player. I'd like to make a land acknowledgement as we begin. Metrolinx wishes to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on these lands and has a responsibility to work with the original keepers of this territory, as well as the many diverse Indigenous peoples living here today. In particular, we acknowledge that the Yonge North Subway Extension project is occurring on the traditional land of the Mississaugas. This includes the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. The YNSC project is occurring on lands that are covered by treaties, including Treaty 13 and the Gunshot Treaty of 1784 within the Williams Treaties territory. Metrolinx remains committed to engaging with Indigenous nations on the YNSC. To turn into safety for a moment, safety is a top priority for Metrolinx, so we do begin all our meetings with a safety moment. So as is our custom, I'll take this opportunity to provide a brief safety moment or reminder, as I believe we do all know this, but with the warmer, more beautiful weather here, it does bring with it, of course, more children playing outside on the streets. On my street alone, I can see a lot of little ones running and cycling, taking their scooters out. So it can be, I've seen close calls, and it's a more of a gentle yet very important reminder to always be aware of the little ones playing on the street, often who are in our blind spots. We may have seen some recent headlines as well that are a stark reminder for that. Just always be mindful of that. Shifting gears for a moment, I'd like to mention the format and the expectations for today before we begin our presentation in a couple moments. We're continuing to listen to your feedback and ensuring that we have a significant portion of the evening for live audio Zoom questions. I understand there's already a few people out there on the Zoom room, so we're excited to listen to your questions and hear them out. But at the same time, there are others who still like the anonymity of the previous format on Teams. So we're going to do a hybrid format like we did on our May 5th Northern Municipalities of York session for those that were here. Where for the first 20 minutes after the presentation, we'll take your typed questions on the Engage Live page. And then from there, I'll be throwing it to my colleague Jackie, who's moderating the Zoom room right now. In that section of the virtual open house, we'll be giving an opportunity to community members to ask their questions live via Zoom. So we encourage you to join that room. So if you'd like to join, if you scroll down to the middle of your screen, you can see a yellow button that says Join Zoom. So to join, please click that and you'll be entered into the Zoom room. Also, a live link, I believe, was sent to your email inbox earlier this afternoon for everyone that registered. So you can also join by clicking that link. So in the meantime, for this upcoming section, following the presentation, you can type in a question on the chat function on the side of your screen, which also allows other participants to vote for the question. And of course, as a reminder to avoid repetitive questions that have already been answered, I'd like to ask you to scroll through any existing questions. If you see one that covers your areas of interest, please vote that one up. And we'll be answering questions based on the popularity of votes. And we've scheduled this overall session to conclude at 8 p.m. So we will begin with the brief presentation and we'll take as many of your questions as possible. However, and this is important, should you have another question or you need clarity, or if there just wasn't enough time tonight to get to your Your question, Metrolinx will be providing written answers on the Metrolinx Engage site within 14 business days. We'll send out an email to all the registrants when the remaining questions have been posted. If you have any questions we cannot answer today, these questions include for specific issues, service-related items, or those topics of confidential nature. We will also be addressing those. And lastly, please be mindful of the conduct inconsistent with our policies will be resulting in removal of comments and the questions. Now with that, finally, I'd like to introduce our esteemed presenters and our panel for this evening. Our presenters, for those who have joined our sessions earlier, you may be familiar, Stephen Collins, who's the program sponsor for the Yonge North Subway Extension. Stephen will co-present and speak to the broad technical elements, as well as the long-range planning for the Yonge North Subway. James Francis is the manager environmental planning assessment team. James will co-present and speak to the environmental assessment studies that are now just beginning, and he'll be speaking to that as well on the panel. And then on our panel, we have Raj Ketterpal, who's our acting VP for Community Engagement, 905. Raj will speak to the communications and community relations. And then we have Devin Horn from Manager of Rapid Transit Project Planning. Devin can speak to the planning as well as the development aspects of the project. We have Lisa Liu, who's a Manager of Property Acquisitions. Lisa can speak property-related questions. Charlie Huang is a Global Lead for Transit Architecture. He's from our Technical Advisor, 1C+. Also from 1C+ is Sam Cullendron, who's an engineer, and he can speak to noise and vibration questions. And finally, we have Julia Kuhn, who's the project manager on the environmental team. Julia will be here to support James on questions on the environmental studies. So with that, at this time, I'll call upon Stephen to provide an overview of the Yonge North project. So Stephen, over to you.
Very good. Thanks, Azim, and good evening, everyone. It continues to be my privilege to work on the Yonge North Subway Extension project for Metrolinx and advance this project through the initial development stages that we're in now and accelerate it towards the construction phase. It is a very exciting time for us on the project as sort of the federal government has recently announced and committed funding to the 4 priority subway projects, including the Yonge North Subway Extension. I've got a series of slides that I'll be going through. Many of them are information that we have presented as part of our series of virtual open houses, sharing information on the initial business case. I will go through them relatively quickly, given the fact it's sort of content that any of you who have participated in these meetings in the past will have seen, and then get to James Francis, who will be presenting sort of new information on the environmental assessment and the program work that we're going to be doing over the course of the next few months. So with that, I'll ask for the next slide, please. As before, the Yonge North Subway Extension will complete the missing link and create the much-needed rapid transit connection between York Region and Toronto. We're planning the approximately 8-kilometer extension to have 4 new stations and connect directly to the TTC Yonge Street Subway at Finch Station. As before, the key stations that we have confirmed so far in the project are Steeles Station, which is a major transit hub connecting all of the rapid sort of surface bus routes along Steeles Avenue directly to the subway at Steeles, helping relieve some of the bus and bus congestion along Yonge Street south of Steeles. Bridge Station achieves the overarching objectives of bringing together all of the future and existing rapid transit services to a single hub, and joining the emerging Richmond Hill Centre and Langstaff Gateway Urban Growth Centre, the subway network. High Tech Station will support Bridge Station, bringing more than half the people who will call Richmond Hill Centre home to within walking distance of the subway. We continue to evaluate 3 neighborhood stations at Hummer, Clark, and Royal Orchard. And while all stations are being studied as part of our ongoing work and no decisions have been made, only one of these stations can be accommodated within the announced $5.6 billion funding envelope. Some of the key benefits of our business case and our project include almost 100,000 daily riders and tens of thousands more people and jobs within a short 10-minute walk of the subway service. Next slide, please. The demand for travel along Yonge Street requires more than 3,000 buses to meet people's mobility needs. The Yonge North Subway Extension will give these people a rapid transit option and save them 22 minutes each way on their trip from York Region to downtown Toronto. The 94,100 daily riders will share a combined 835,000 minutes saved from their daily travels, allowing them to put this time to better use. The extension will also reduce the total distance traveled by cars during the morning rush hour period by 7,700 kilometers, over a single journey, that would be like driving from East Gwillimbury to the boundary of BC's Yoho National Park and back again. So a real project that is going to help manage the ongoing congestion problem that we have along the southern boundary and northern boundaries of York Region and the City of Toronto. Next slide, please. Our stations at Bridge and High Tech are placing the transit services where the highest number of people will be living and working. Bridge Station is a key hub with significant transit network integration, purporting efficient connections for people transferring from the Yonge North subway extension to other transit services, and placing convenient station access close to where tens of thousands of people will live and work. High Tech Station, although it is close to Bridge Station, will place the station centrally to a significant growth area, bringing half the people who will call Richmond Hill Centre home within a short walk of the station. And by using the existing rail corridor and the space between Highways 407 and Highway 7, we've optimized the use of that scarce land resource, freeing up that precious land for other more productive community building uses. The combination of Bridge Station and High Tech Station, which are serving different communities and functions, is considered a key driver of our benefits and bringing transit closer to where the highest number of people will live and work. Next slide, please. Through our initial business case, we completed detailed studies on 3 alignment options. Option 1, which is the EA alignment that many of you will know from the past work that was done by York Region and the City of Toronto, travels along Yonge Street, fully underground, and shifts easterly just north of Holy Cross Cemetery. And this alignment, option 1, can accommodate 3 total stations within the available funding. Option 2, which is a slight refinement of the EA alignment, allows for a different station placement location while it is fully underground, and because of the underground construction, its cost profile can only accommodate 3 total stations within the available funding. The option 3 alignment, which is the most dramatic shift from what had previously been studied on the project, shifts the subway off of Yonge Street in the vicinity of Royal Orchard Boulevard and travels below the Royal Orchard community until it eventually aligns with the CN Rail corridor, which then enables the optimal placement of stations to service the Langstaff Gateway and Richmond Hill Centre area and places our Bridge Station at the convergence point of all of that rapid transit service. The subway is underground along Yonge Street, below the community and the CN corridor, before it does rise to the surface north of the Holy Cross Cemetery at Bridge Station. Option 3 has the distinct advantage of accommodating 4 stations within the available funding, although it does require us to travel below the Royal Orchard community. As part of our value engineering and sort of work we did prior to the initial business case, we investigated additional options for the route at the north end of the project. With the objective of reaching our critical Bridge Station, we assessed various alternatives that would travel east of Yonge Street, below the cemetery, below the Langstaff Gateway area. In these situations, the existing watercourse and the tightness of the horizontal curves required in the subway alignment meant that these options did not meet the minimum geometric requirements for the subway. And as such, we did not advance them into the detail analysis as part of our initial business case. Next slide, please. Our project is moving forward to deliver this important transit service. We are advancing the next phase of our business case process, referred to as the preliminary design business case. And we have that scheduled for completion in the fall of 2021. We are also moving forward with the initial procurement stage of the main project contracts. While this procurement will take over 2 years to complete, we are also working on an early works construction projects that are designed to both accelerate the delivery of the project and de-risk the main contracts. 2 early works projects that we've identified so far are some modifications at Finch Subway Station to ensure that we have a good interface between the Yonge North Subway Extension and the existing Line 1 TTC subway service, and what we're referring to as the launch site, where we plan on launching the tunnel boring machines for building the subway tunnels, and that is up at the north end of the project in the Langstaff Gateway area. I'd also like to highlight that we are preparing an addendum to the original environmental assessment. This addendum will include public review and comment period, which is scheduled to start this fall. James Francis will speak in detail about the EA addendum, or the environmental assessment addendum, and the public consultation program as part of his next slides. Next slide, please. Our ongoing public consultation is planned to continue through the planning, design, and construction phases of the Yonge North Subway Extension. To date, and many of you have participated in them, we've completed virtual open house events, we've had stakeholder meetings and sessions with individuals, landowners, ratepayer associations, and non-government organizations. This is all since our initial business case was released and is all part of our consultation and engagement process. This work has been really informative and valuable for our team. In addition to the ongoing community engagement work we're doing, we are launching working groups and community members and our project team called Community Liaison Committee. The first one that's being pulled together is for the Royal Orchard community, and more information will be shared on that in the coming weeks. As part of the environmental assessment process, we aim to begin consulting on the specific items, including results of our existing condition studies and results of our impact assessment study and solutions proposed to reduce those impacts. Of note, our noise and vibration. My colleague James, as I mentioned, is here to present the work plan for the EA addendum. I'll now turn it over to him to take you through the next few slides.
That's great. Thanks very much, Stephen. Next slide, please. So as Stephen mentioned, we're undertaking environmental studies as part of the transit project assessment process for the Yonge North Subway Extension. And in these studies, we're both examining potential impacts of the project on the environment, and we'll be putting forward solutions to mitigate the effects of the project. As Stephen mentioned, the results of these studies, we'll be presenting them as part of future public meetings, and we'll also be documenting them within our environmental project report addendum, which we'll be making available for public review later this year. So all of this work builds off the good work previously done on the Yonge North Subway Extension, including the 2009 Environmental Project Report, an EPR addendum, Environmental Project Report addendum completed in 2014, that included a train storage facility to the north of Richmond Hill Station, as well as the initial business case, which was brought forward earlier this year and identifies the new route that we're assessing in the EPR addendum. So our current EPR addendum is looking at the changes that are captured in the initial business case, including changes to the route, changes to stations, and changes to the train storage facility. Next slide, please. So getting into a bit more detail about the proposed design changes. So we're assessing the change to the route. So the route is currently extending about 8 kilometers north of Finch Station. About 6 kilometers of that is underground, and the remainder at surface. We're also studying the new location of Bridge Station, previously assessed as Langstaff Station. We're also assessing changes to tunneling. So we're studying a solution that has one launch shaft and one extraction shaft for the tunnel boring machines. The previous environmental assessment assessed multiple launch and extraction sites. We're also assessing the track work within both the tunnel and the at-grade segments, as well as at the train storage facility. Next slide, please. One of the other design changes that we're assessing is the at-grade train storage facility. That facility is planned to accommodate up to 15 6-car trains. And as well, as a result of the route changes, we do anticipate some potential shifts in locations of traction power substations and emergency exit buildings compared to what was previously assessed in the 2009 Environmental Project Report. The traction power substations are required at intervals along the route to provide power to the subway system. And similarly, emergency exit buildings are required at intervals along the route to provide safe exit or egress from the subway in the event that there would be an emergency. Next slide, please. So in our environmental assessment work that's ongoing, we're looking not only at the design changes compared to the 2009 Environmental Project Report and the 2014 Environmental Project Report addendum. We're also looking at existing environmental conditions throughout the entire study area. It's been more than 10 years since that environmental assessment was completed, and we're taking a holistic look, a complete look at all the environmental conditions from tip to tail in the project to make sure that we fully understand the context in which the project will be constructed and operated. So we're looking at all of the kind of typical factors that are examined in an environmental assessment under the transit project process, including the natural environment. So we're undertaking plant and tree inventories. We're looking at fish and fish habitat, breeding birds, wildlife, and species at risk. For cultural heritage, we're looking to see if there are any additional listed or designated heritage properties in the study area since 2009. For air quality, we're looking at the latest data available from provincial and federal air quality monitoring stations. For noise and vibration, we're measuring current noise and vibration levels, which set our target for our noise and vibration solutions to manage the effects of the project. And also for traffic, we are getting the latest data about traffic service, level of service at intersections, congestion in the area, so that we can best plan both our construction and future operation. Next slide, please. We're also looking at land use and socioeconomics. So as part of that study, we're reviewing how the land in the study area is used, as well as plans for future development. And we're identifying land use and socioeconomic features in the study area, such as places of worship, bicycle and pedestrian routes, multi-use trails, and parks. And our last main study in the environmental assessment addendum is archaeology. So in this study, we're looking to see in the study area if any additional archaeological assessments have been completed since 2009. We're going out into the field to check and see if there are any remaining areas that retain potential for archaeological resources, and we'll be working with Indigenous nations as we advance that work. Next slide, please. So in terms of the ongoing and upcoming environmental activities, you may have seen our staff out in the field collecting data. So we've been out collecting noise and vibration levels. We've been out in the last week undertaking frog call surveys. We'll be out in the coming weeks surveying for breeding birds, taking inventories of vegetation, looking at fish and fish habitat, potential habitat for species at risk, looking at properties to identify if there's potential for cultural heritage value or interest, and that will be ongoing in the coming months. Next slide, please. And so in terms of the look-ahead schedule, so at the moment we are in the leftmost portion of the purple part of the schedule under EPR addendum preparation. So right now, as mentioned, we're out in the field, we're collecting information about existing conditions. Looking ahead into the summer, we'll be undertaking our impact assessment, where we predict the potential impacts of the project and put forward mitigation recommendations to mitigate or to minimize those impacts. And we'll be documenting all of that work in our environmental project report addendum, which we'll be making available for public review and comment. And so that public review and comment period kicks off when we issue our notice of the environmental project report addendum, which means that document will then be available on our website for review and comment. We're planning a 30-day review period. Following that, Metrolinx has up to 35 days to respond to the comments and then update the EPR addendum based on what we hear during that review period. Once that EPR addendum is updated, we'll then be issuing a notice that it's available. It will be posted on our website for review, and that starts a period up to 35 days during which the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks can review and potentially issue a notice regarding the environmental assessment work. So throughout this process, we'll be undertaking ongoing engagement. We'll be coming back to share results. As they become available, we'll be sharing information about existing conditions and our impact assessment, and potentially most of interest, the mitigation solutions that we'll be bringing forward, and very much looking forward to coming back and sharing that information. And so with that, I'd like to pass it back to Azim.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Stephen. If you can go to the next slide, please. I just want to, as a final touch point, we always welcome your feedback, and there are multiple channels for you to reach us that are listed here. Myself and the rest of our community relations team are always open to chat over the phone or in Zoom or virtually right now, and hopefully eventually in person as well. So those are the numerous channels you can reach us at. So again, thanks to James and Stevens for the presentation. In a moment, we're going to start taking your questions. Just before we do that, we'd like to acknowledge again Mayor Scarpiti, Bevilacqua, and DePaula for being here tonight, as well as Councillors Irish, Chan, and Sheffman, And an important note just before we begin, if your question is not answered today again, we do endeavor to provide written answers on the Metrolinx Engage page within 14 business days. A link will be shared. And finally, for tonight's format, we're going to start with roughly about 20 minutes on typed questions on Microsoft Engage, and then we'll go to the Zoom room where I understand there's a full house there with Jackie ready to ask some questions. So we'll be looking forward to that. And again, my name is Zim Ahmed, and this event is being closed captioned. And to use this feature, please enable it on your video player. Our terrific panel is ready to take your questions. So let's get started with some of these questions. Just see what I know we have with the recent funding announcement with the federal government. We do have questions about what that means for this project. So the question here I'll read is, we've heard that the federal government is investing $12 billion in the Greater Toronto Area for transit. Now that we have additional funds, why can't we route the subway up Yonge Street as planned? So with the funding question, and Stephen, you're as a sponsor, I'll pass that question to you.
Thanks, Azim. And yes, very exciting times with the federal government making their funding commitments known over the past week or so. Just to be specific, it was on May 11th. The federal government announced that they would be contributing $10.4 billion towards the Ontario's 4 priority subway projects. So Yonge North Subway Extension is one of them, and the others being the Ontario Line, the Scarborough Subway Extension, and the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension. So it's $10.4 billion that the federal government has contributed to the 4 priority projects. Really important to note that the funding sort of discussions that have gone on between the partners at the province of Ontario and York Region have always anticipated that there would be a 40% funding contribution coming from the federal government. And so what's important to note here is that this isn't necessarily new money that's coming in to fund the project. It's the funding commitment that was always anticipated by the funding partners to be coming from the federal government. And so this is the federal portion of the total $5.6 billion funding envelope that we've been talking about in the past. And again, really exciting times that our project now has the funding that it needs to move itself forward and really get into the implementation stage.
Thanks, Stephen. We have a question now, the highest voted question, actually. I apologize, it's coming second. This one I'm going to throw to James. It's about the environment. The question is, what has Metrolinx learned about potential effects toxic soil and air emanating from the abandoned fuel system? Why are we even entertaining the idea of tunneling there? So James, I'll ask you to take that one, please.
Great, thanks Azim, and thanks for the question. So we are undertaking a full due diligence program to understand the site conditions that we might be encountering in construction of the project. And it's not at all unusual for us in our projects to encounter contaminated soil. We have a full team of qualified persons and other specialists that will be helping us determine our approach to how to address any contamination and any mitigation or remediation that may be needed to make sure that we're protecting for health and safety. I think it's also important to keep in mind that we also adhere to the criteria put out by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. They have criteria for soil. They have criteria for air quality, and we do adhere to this. We have to adhere to this, and it's to ensure health and safety for our projects. So very much on the radar, and very much part of the due diligence program that we're continuing to advance.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. We have a question about the alignment from an engineering perspective. So I think, Stephen, I'll ask you to start with this, and maybe one of our technical folks can jump in if needed. The question is, why can't experienced engineers not find a way to go up Yonge Street and turn east at Longbridge? Why develop options 1 and 2 if they were not possible?
Thanks, Azim. So I think in answering this, I'll take the second part of that question first. And so why develop options 1 and 2 if they were not possible? I think it's important to clarify that options 1 and 2 that we studied through our initial business case are feasible options. They are possible. What our business case concluded is that on the overall benefits associated with options 1, 2, and 3, option 3 is the recommended or preferred option to move forward, which is what we're moving forward with as our reference alignment. But I just wanted to sort of clarify that options 1 and 2 are possible. Regarding sort of why can't experienced engineers find a way to go up Yonge and turn east at Longbridge? So as part of our previous meetings, we've discussed some of the alignment options or the route options that we looked at before we developed options 1, 2, and 3 and put them into our business case. We took a look at an option that would go straight up Yonge Street, curve to the east below the Langstaff Gateway development with the objective of getting to our bridge station at grade. And because of the limitations on the horizontal curve, so the curves that the subway would have to go through, and the grades or the steepness of the grades that we would have to rise the subway up from, and the fact that we have to be below Yonge Street, and we have the Pomona Mills Creek running through the middle of the Langstaff Gateway, we could not get an alignment or a route option that would work, meeting all of the minimum geometric criteria. And so we do have very experienced engineers working on this, but we could not develop a route option that would meet all of the minimum geometric requirements.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that answer. Context. Next question we have, it's somewhat similar, but it's more specific to Holy Cross Cemetery. For option 3, why can't development be done through the Holy Cross Cemetery? Specifically, what are the sensitivities and how can they be addressed? I'll ask you to jump in, Stephen, to begin.
Yep. So again, reflecting back on some of our previous meetings that some of you may have been at, we talked about the alignment option that we looked at going below the Holy Cross Cemetery. And what we found with that option was the sort of the depth that we would have to go below Pomona Mills Creek did not enable us to get up to the bridge station at grade that is the key driver of our benefits. And so when we took a look at our option 3 alignment, that is the original option 3 from the initial business case and shown as the pink color on the alignment slide or the route slide that we had tonight, what we identified was that alignment, because of where it was located, and I'll say the closeness of it to our bridge station, meant that it was relatively shallow below the Royal Orchard community, and it was very shallow below the corner of the Holy Cross Cemetery. And so as we had talked about before, we took a look at how could we increase the depth that the subway was traveling below the Royal Orchard community, and how could we reduce the impacts on the Holy Cross Cemetery. And that's where our option 3 refinement came from. And that's what's been documented as our reference alignment and what was shown on sort of the first slide of the presentation tonight. So that was an alignment or a route that we set out with the objective to reduce the impact on the Royal Orchard community. And that was specifically to increase the depth that the subway would be traveling below the community and reduce the impact on the cemetery. And that was to sort of remove the tunnel from traveling below the cemetery.
Thanks, Stephen. So the next question, it's a little bit different from what we've seen. It's about stations. And Stephen, I might be asking you to go for this one as well. If Metrolinx's budget only allows for 3 stations by keeping the line along Yonge Street, then why not just stick to that plan, only the 3 stations? It's not a race to the finish line.
What we're trying to do is maximize the benefits of the project and maximize the use of the investment that you all are making in this project. And so while I mentioned in the answer to one of the earlier questions that options 1 and 2 are options that are possible, meaning that they're feasible, they can be designed and built, they don't have the same benefits associated with a bridge station that we're identifying on our option 3 alignment. And so when we think about why not just stick to the original plan, Well, what we're trying to do through our work is to maximize the benefits that the existing communities and the future communities are going to get from the investments that you're making in the subway project.
Excellent. This one actually dovetails well with what we just answered. So the question is more about bridge and high-tech stations. So why the need for the two stations being a mere 400 meters apart? Can we do away with one and add Clark in Royal Orchard as opposed to either or? So Stephen, I'll ask you to jump in first.
Sure. So our bridge and high-tech stations, we acknowledge they are close together, but they are being positioned in the location that is going to have the highest numbers of people and jobs along the entire route. The development that the region of York, the city of Richmond Hill, and the city of Markham are planning for the Richmond Hill Center and Langstaff Gateway area is significant, and we want to make sure that the transit service that's going to go into that area is going to enable those people to choose a transit lifestyle associated sort of with meeting their mobility needs. And so the placement of those two stations is important to that provincially designated urban growth center. Bridge Station, as we've talked about, is the key transit hub. So that's going to be the convergence point of the subway, the Richmond Hill GO line, the Highway 7 BRT service, the Yonge Street BRT service, the existing 407 GO bus services, and the future 407 transitway. All of those transit services are going to converge at that single hub, and it's going to be the place where people can jump on the subway, or they can take the GO train and jump on the Viva services to access the employment lands in Markham or in Vaughan. So it really is a transit hub. It has the sort of the frontage onto it has the better placement than the original Longbridge station under the original plan of serving the Langstaff Gateway development area. So this is a development area that's planned by the region of York and the city of Markham to have significant population and employment. And we've placed Bridge Station in a better location for that future development area. High-tech station is not so much a transit hub station, but it is more serving the walk and the kiss and ride customer. And really that's the station that's going to be within a short walk of the Richmond Hill Center residents. But also it's going to provide that good connection for folks who are wanting to drive and sort of drop off one of their sort of family or friends to access the subway service. So they're really serving two different functions. The Bridge Station is that transit intermodal hub, and the high-tech station is sort of a sort of a station that's going to serve the walk-in and the kiss and ride customer.
Thanks, Stephen. You might need to get some sips of water in there because we're going to you a lot right now. The next question, actually, we might start with you, Stephen, but perhaps Devin from planning can jump in on this. It's a question about a potential future extension in Richmond Hill. How many homes will be disrupted in any future extension of the subway to get to the alignment back to Yonge Street? So Devin or Stephen, whoever wants to start with that one.
Perhaps I'll start, and then maybe Devin can jump in. So with bringing the subway to the CN corridor, what we're doing is we're giving choices for a future extension of the subway. We're designing and building it to accommodate a future extension, and it sort of is something that will need to be studied as part of a future planning study and essentially an initial business case for a future extension. At this time, no decisions or no analysis has been done as to whether or not the subway should continue up the CN corridor and essentially provide service to 16th Avenue and Major Mackenzie Drive east of Yonge Street, or take the subway back below ground and send it up Yonge Street. What our study needs to do is it needs to take a look at the future of the Richmond Hill GO line and the service along the Richmond Hill GO line, and the recently completed rapid transit service on Yonge Street, which is the Viva BRT service. And so there's a lot of transit service in sort of the north-south direction through this area. And what we would need to do is study the sort of the ideal station placement and alignment for a future subway extension. But that study has not been done. it will be part of future work by Metrolinx.
Yeah, I think that sums it up quite nicely, Stephen. Thank you. But yeah, it gives you those options, and having that position within the corridor, literally positions you well to continue along that corridor if needed. But you would have to look at all the variabilities and options headed north. But you're at surface there and positions you well to continue along the corridor.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Stephen. In a few moments, we'll be heading over to the Zoom room. I understand there's a few questions there. We'll take this next one here, refers to the April 26th meeting where you heard Phil Verster. This is the Markham Development Services Committee meeting. We heard Phil Verster say that he is open to revisiting option 3. Could you please advise what he has done since to revisit option 3? Stephen, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, sure, I'll start. Yes, at the April 26th meeting, I think the sort of remarks were that, we continue to evaluate the options through our project development and business case processes. As I mentioned in the presentation component, we're in the preliminary design business case phase right now. And that really is taking a look at that option 3 in more detail, trying to sort of refine and sort of continue to tweak the alignment to sort of do 2 things. One is to maximize the benefits, and second thing is to reduce or eliminate impacts. And so our work has continued down the path of taking a look at how do we maximize the benefits and how do we absolutely minimize the impacts. And so that work has continued on. And some of the environmental studies that James Francis spoke about are going to feed into the quantification of the impacts, so we can really understand how we need to continue evolving that design to reduce and eliminate those impacts.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. Let's see what we have next. We'll give a few more moments before we head to the Zoom room. This question is about documentation. How can we access the documents that show Metrolinx shared alternate proposals with the provincial government? I'm not sure who wants to take this one. This might relate to the initial business case. Perhaps Stephen, I'll go to you as a default for this one.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Azim. So as part of our development of our initial business case, including the alignment options we were investigating prior to starting the initial business case work, we were sharing information with our colleagues at the Ministry of Transportation. And as we got into the development of our initial business case and sort of working through each of the 3 options, the technical details behind the options, the sort of benefits associated with each of the options, we did engage with staff at the municipalities and at the TTC to sort of understand sort of things like land use, impacts, and some comments that we would sort of be receiving from staff at the municipalities. And all of that work was done in consultation with staff from the Ministry of Transportation. When we ultimately presented our initial business case to the Ministry of Transportation, it included sort of the 3 options that are included in our initial business case. And it also included the supplementary analysis that we did post the 3 options in the business case that ultimately supported the decision to proceed with the option 3 refinement as the reference alignment.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay.
Let's see, the next question we have here is about, again, documentation. Can you confirm if the church and/or cemetery has contacted Metrolinx in any form or shape? Can you share relevant documents pertaining to this? Either Raj or Stephen maybe can talk to if we had any communication with the church.
I mean, I can start off and feel free to jump in, Stephen. I mean, we had a meeting with, stakeholders, elected officials, community associations, including Holy Cross Cemetery. We're meeting with all stakeholders and engaging with all of them. So it's part of everything that we've been doing since we released the IBC. We're proactively going out and engaging, and also responding to requests that are coming in, and we'll continue to have active conversations throughout this whole process. I think the technical side, as we're kind of looking to do our geotechnical work, as we've been reaching out to the community and providing notices, we're doing them with other landowners as well, just to be a good neighbor, to ensure that we're providing enough notice and having those detailed conversations on the technical work that needs to be done as we're building up this project.
Yep. Thanks, Raj. Appreciate that. Next question refers to transit in general, so perhaps Devin from planning can jump in to start. Why do we need a subway to service Bridge Station? Why do we not link Oriole GO Station to Leslie Station on the Shepherd line and use the savings elsewhere? And the last comment is, please stop wasting money. So maybe perhaps Devin, you can start off on the transit portion there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess, there's a couple things here. We're really trying to build a network solution here to the congestion in the region. And so providing folks with as many opportunities as possible is the best way to do that, and to get people into the transit network to be able to get to where they need to go. And this rapid transit network is, it's not just a commuter service in the sense that you're being able to use it in multi-directional use, in terms of it doesn't matter what time of day you're using it to get to where you need to go. So for Bridge Station, it's helping to bring rapid transit service to as many people as we can who live in the Richmond Hill Centre and Langstaff Gateway areas. These are both designated as urban growth centers. The existing line runs through the center of them, so the building the stations that will make it easier for people to get to the existing bus and GO train is extremely important to us. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is trying to break down some of those barriers that are in the region there, in terms of the highway corridors, the rail corridors, and these stations help to connect the communities better.
Thanks, Devin. I think the next question is about tax dollars and about development. So the question is, under option 3, why are my hard-earned tax dollars being used to diminish the value of my home and enriching wealthy developers? So Stephen, I'll ask you to start with this question, and anyone else on the panel can jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Azim. And I think it's really important to recognize that what we've identified as option 3 provides the highest benefits for the stations and the scope that's available within the funding that's being made available for this project. And so we're looking at maximizing the benefits for the investments that the governments, which are your tax dollars, are making in the transit project. So we're trying to present a project that provides the highest benefits for the use of those tax dollars. And what's really important to note, as I mentioned in sort of our bridge and high-tech station question, is that's an area that's been identified by the region, by the city of Richmond Hill, and by the city of Markham as a real key growth area. And that's going to be home to tens of thousands of people and tens of thousands of jobs. And we're trying to align the subway service where the municipalities are identifying where the people are going to be living and working, and the highest densities of people are going to be living and working. So we're trying to align the transit planning with the land use planning that's been done. It's been done for over a decade to provide the highest benefits for the most number of people.
Nazim, if I may, and thanks, Stephen, for that. It's also important to note that any decisions we're making on alignment and station locations are in the interest of also improving customer experience, right? And access to transit, and Stephen said maximizing ridership, achieving the travel time savings, and creating better access to jobs. And we're balancing all of that criteria by cost and community considerations as well. Very important.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Stephen. We'll do one last question in this format before we head to the Zoom room. The question is about Clark Station. How likely is it that Clark Avenue will be chosen to be one of the potential stations? And do York residents have a vote on this? Would very much like to see this happen. So they're pro Clark Station. So Stephen, if you can weigh in on that.
Yeah, so what Metrolinx is doing is we're studying, I'll call it the relative benefits, or the incremental benefits that each of the 3 neighborhood stations would have as the 4th station in the project scope. Our work is ongoing, and we haven't come to any sort of final analysis or final conclusions on the 3 neighborhood stations. So I can't provide any insight or additional information on the likelihood of Clark Station or Commerce Station or Royal Orchard Station. But what I will say is that our detailed transit benefits analysis is ongoing. And sort of the would very much like to see this happen, sort of heard loud and clear. We've been hearing quite a lot from the communities along the corridor about the importance of each of the 3 neighborhood stations to the communities that exist there today, and to some of the work that will be taking place over the coming years to sort of build up some additional density around those areas.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. So with that, we're gonna, Jackie, if you're ready in the Zoom room, I'll pass it off to you, and we'll hear some audio questions.
Thank you, Azim. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to the Zoom room. We've heard from residents that there was a need for a more direct form of communication, and so we want to assure you that we've heard you and are hoping to bridge the gap with this new format. This is the 2nd time we're offering live questions via Zoom, so please ensure that you take this opportunity. And for those just joining us now, in this section of our virtual open house, we'll be giving an opportunity to community members to ask their questions live via Zoom. So for those wanting to ask questions on Zoom, please click on the yellow button titled Join Zoom on the Metrolinx Engage page for tonight's meeting, and you'll be redirected to the Zoom room if you're not already here. So having said that, we'll be answering questions in the order of hands raised. And as a reminder, I'd just like to let everybody know to please try to keep your questions clear and concise so we can get to as many people as possible. We have 12 so far, so keep raising your hands if you're interested in asking a live question. And with that, we'll go to our first question coming from Deputy Mayor Hamilton. Deputy Mayor, if you could please go ahead and unmute yourself. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. I'm supporting your local Markham councillor in Thornhill, Keith Irish. We're both opposed to option 3. Here's my question. Transport Action Ontario, through Peter Mysick, their president, brought forward a new route proposal that would not go under people's homes and that would allow for the geographical bending and the slope that Stephen talked about earlier, that would allow that. Can you tell me where you are with looking at that proposal? And I guess it goes to Stephen.
Yeah, so I'll open it up to the panel. Stephen, if you want to tackle this one, and then maybe some of the other panelists might want to jump in.
Yeah, I do. I'll start, and thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. So you're absolutely right. Transport Action Ontario through Peter Mysick brought not 1 but 2 alternative alignment options to our attention. The one that you mentioned that would come off Yonge Street, go below the Langstaff Gateway area, and then up through to Richmond Hill Centre. There was a second option that Transport Action identified that was submitted to us, which does go through the cemetery property. Our technical team is looking at those in detail, and the commitment that we have made to Transport Action Ontario was that we would review that and provide Transport Action Ontario with our detailed comments back on those proposals. That review is underway. The option that they proposed that travels below the Langstaff Gateway community is quite similar to one of the options that we looked at as part of our pre-initial business case work, but there are some differences to it, and we're going through our technical review to assess it.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So our next question comes from Camilla. I don't know if Camilla is still on the line, but if you are, please go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours. No, Camilla? Okay, we'll go to the next person, Fred Weingast. The floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel as well. And I echo Deputy Mayor Hamilton's comments about the need to look at the additional options presented by Transport Ontario. I'm going to come at it a different way, and we won't be talking about options 1, 2, or 3, but I wanted to look at the scenarios on cost savings and value to the community. On the website and even in this presentation, you continually reference one case of coming south along Yonge Street and then connecting into the subway. As you know, there are other bus routes in South Central York region that may need to be rerouted or may have benefit by being rerouted. Those include Bathurst, Dufferin, Clark, Bayview, as well as Route 2 and Route 3, the Milliken and one other. I was wondering if, not for answer today, but in the ongoing and sort of as a follow-on answer, can you please have somebody on the team actually run scenarios of people starting at Dufferin and let's say Major Mackenzie, which is the northern part of that route, Bathurst and Rutherford, Bayview and 16th, and Dufferin and Clark, which is an east-west route that couldn't go across, to not only identify the amount of time potentially saved, but is there a better savings by plugging the routes into Clark, into Bridge, into Steeles. For Royal Orchard, I'm not sure which bus routes you could plug in that wouldn't either be serviced by Clark or by Bridge. Other than, I believe there's Route 3 that goes to York University. That might be the only one that comes close to that area. So I'd appreciate if, not for an answer now, but for something to be added to the website, is to look at those additional questions. And as part of the Keep York Moving team that Peter Misek and I are part of, we are also currently working on a survey on the specifics on improving the business case for neighborhood stations, specifically Clark. And we also acknowledge that the TTC and YRT have recently put out a joint survey on 6 different methods on lowering or at least reducing the two-fare wall, which gives an unfair advantage to Cummer as a neighborhood station where people transferring do not pay 2 fares, versus Clark, Royal Orchard, Bridge, High Tech, and Steeles, where any YRT individual will pay 2 fares. So it's a bit of homework for our future, but if we can get a commitment to run some of those additional scenarios, not only for time, but cost under current scenario, as well as distance.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Stephen or any of the panelists, if there's anything you wanted to add before we go to the next question.
So lots of information there, and thank you, Mr. Weingast. I think the quick answer is yes, we can do some work on those scenarios that you were mentioning. I think it would benefit us to sort of have a session with Keep York Moving to understand in a little bit more detail sort of what you're asking for in those detailed questions, just so that we're understanding it correctly and using sort of a meeting forum to exchange that information. And regarding the work of TTC and York Region Transit, yeah, we are aware of their ongoing sort of work together to look at fare and service integration. And we'll be monitoring and following that work closely because, as you have mentioned, one of the aspects that is important for the Yonge North Subway Extension project is fare and service integration, given the fact we are going to be interfacing with TTC, GO Bus services, Rail services and York Region Transit services.
Maybe I'll just add on. Maybe I'll just add on to that on the fare integration work that there is work underway with the Ministry of Transportation and our municipal partners to explore opportunities to better integrate fare systems, like Stephen said, across the region and make it easier and more convenient to take transit, thinking customers first. So that's just a quick update there.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Our next question comes from Rani Wilson. Rani, if you can unmute your mic, the floor is yours as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rani Wilson. I'm actually a resident with my husband across Royal Orchard. I have a question on vibrations. Based on European and other studies, there are vibration monitoring systems installed in the buildings in the vicinity of the construction of the subway to estimate through measurement of the WODL ratios, which is the vibration-based damage identification and condition by people. Are studies like this being implemented for our proposed subway from Steeles Avenue to High Court to help decrease vibrations for affected residents once construction is underway and built, as noticed by residents of Bloor and Keele stations? Thank you for taking the question.
Thank you, Rani. And I'll put that to the panelists. Perhaps, Stephen, you want to start off and then additional panelists can hop in.
Yeah, happy to. So thank you for that question. What I'm going to do is refer it to James Francis to talk about the baseline and studies that we're doing regarding noise and vibration, and then ask Sam, who is our noise and vibration expert, to provide some additional detail on what we're doing to assess and then mitigate noise and vibration.
That's great. Thanks, Stephen, and thank you for the question. So we are, as Stephen mentioned, we're out looking at baseline noise and vibration levels now to inform our environmental assessment work. In the environmental assessment, we'll be predicting future noise and vibration levels and committing to solutions to manage the noise and vibration. In terms of the construction vibration, we will be monitoring throughout construction. Also in locations near active construction, we'll be looking to undertake pre-condition surveys so that we have a baseline of those conditions and we're able to monitor that throughout construction so that, in the unlikely event, if there were to be any kind of an issue, we could rectify. So we'll have that ongoing vibration monitoring throughout construction, and that will help us and our constructors adapt their approach to construction as they're going. So if levels are looking like they're creeping up and we're approaching what we call an action level, we would then look to revise the approach to construction to really manage that vibration. So Sam, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
No, that was great, James. Thanks a lot. And I think just one more thing I'd like to add is we are completing a kind of assessment of what the vibration levels might be. And the intent of that assessment is to identify any potential issues that might occur and try to avoid those issues in the first place through design and vibration mitigation of construction from the get-go. And of course, as you said, we will be monitoring vibration to make sure that the levels are within the limits. So yeah, we are taking a kind of a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
So
right, we'll
Sam, just before we move off that question, the question did reference the sort of Bloor Danforth line. Any sort of knowledge or information you have on the Bloor Danforth line and sort of how it might compare from construction and operation to what we might be proposing on Yonge North?
Yep. Yeah. Good point, Steve. So the Bloor Danforth line was built quite some time ago. It was built at a fairly shallow depth as well, and incorporated very little or no vibration isolation in that design. Modern subway systems, including Shepherd and the Toronto York Spadina subway extension, do include a fair amount of vibration control built into the subway. So the levels from modern subway systems are quite a bit lower than the older subway systems like the Bloor Danforth or the original Yonge subway line.
Great, thanks, Sam.
Sorry about that. The next question we have is from John Gooderman. He's asked that I read the question out. So his question is, does option 3 involve exit and ventilation facilities above ground in the residential areas? Panelists?
Yeah, so that's a good technical question. What I would ask is perhaps Charlie sort of answer to some of the sort of subway elements that we're going to need through the sort of entire length of the subway, including Royal Orchard community. Charlie?
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. I'll handle the question under subway designs, and especially underground stations. There needs to be generally 3 things that need to occur. That's including the traction power substations that runs the power to operate the line, ventilation systems that includes emergency ventilation to ventilate the underground tunnels and allow safe evacuation and safety for the passengers and workers. And also the last thing is for egress from the tunnel. So those are emergency exit buildings that allow for access and exit of passengers on the ground. So within this line, there will be emergency exit buildings, ventilation shafts with the stations, and traction power substations. So within the underground section, we're looking currently at where those placements are. With the refined alignment, we'll be able to zero down those stations. Those locations most likely at the latter stages of the year. And with the above ground stations, which include bridge and high tech, we're most likely seeing traction power substations somewhere along there, but there will be no emergency exit or ventilation because they're above ground. Hope that answers your question, and anything else, please let us know.
Great,
good.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much, Charlie. All right, we'll go to the next question coming from John Sharon. John, if you'd like to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. I'll keep it short and concise. Given Vaughan Council has passed a resolution which endorses option 1, Royal Orchard community endorses option 1, it seems an overwhelming support for option 1 versus option 3. Will Metrolinx now consider public consultation for a full review of option 1?
Stephen, I'll ask you to address that one.
Yeah, so what we're proceeding with is sort of developing our preliminary design business case for our option 3 refinement or our reference alignment. The initial business case work evaluated each of the 3 options, and we came to the conclusion that sort of the option 3 alignment provides the sort of highest benefits for the available funding and makes the best use of the available funding. At this point in time, we do not have sort of the plan to go and consult broadly on the options that were studied under the initial business case and sort of revisit that. Our sort of work plan moving forward is to sort of continue looking at the option 3 refinement, the reference alignment, and study that through sort of the current preliminary design business case process that we're under, and the environmental assessment addendum that is underway, as James mentioned.
Great, thank you, Stephen. All right, we'll go to the next question coming from Peter P. Peter, if you'd like to ask your question, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. The question that I had was actually very similar to the last question, so perhaps I'll ask the other question that I had, which is to do with the public consultation process. The public consultation process that was undertaken for the plan that was completed in 2009 and is set out in pages 2 to 11 of the September 25th, 2008 planning document is a really good example of how an important project of this nature can be developed collaboratively with input from all stakeholders. Added to that, one of the federal government's conditions for funding includes, and I quote, engagement processes that enable early community involvement, inclusive of local communities and diverse voices and stakeholders. So the question is, why did you not undertake the same consultative process that was done in 2008 and as is required by the federal government for the major alignment change that you are proposing in option 3? This evening you gave some outline of a public consultation process, but it really is simply just telling us what you're going to do and not listening to or giving consideration to any of our input. I don't see how that's public consultation.
Thank you, Peter. Raj and James, perhaps I'll ask you to address that question.
Sure, happy to start, and thank you, Peter, for that question. I do want to assure everyone that our engagement and consultation is not just an exercise, and we're actively listening and taking your feedback. And with the release of our initial business case, that's just the first step of our planning process, and that will include frequent conversations with communities. The results are part of the recommendations from the initial business case are backed up by evidence, and we want to make sure that the proposal that we're bringing forward for consultation is something that we can confidently deliver. Our goal is to ensure that we bring transit to the most people and also limiting the impacts on homes, businesses, and communities as a whole. We've identified the path that the transit light will take. We're now targeting our outreach to start the discussion and have those conversations around those impacts and how we're going to solve for them. And that's what we're doing now. I mean, there's going to be a lot more conversations as we move forward on this project. We're really in the inform and consultation phase right now. As James spoke to already in the presentation, we'll be actively engaging in the environmental assessment phase as well. And maybe James, if you want to cover off on anything that I might have missed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Raj. And while we are in the early phases of engagement for the environmental assessment, we've very much been hearing from the community to date. And I wanted to note it's the feedback and the concerns we're hearing on items, particularly noise and vibration. We're taking that back and we're accelerating our noise and vibration work in response to what we've been hearing, so that we can come back and share results, as soon as we're able. So very much looking forward to continuing that discussion, and we'll be back to continue to share results over the coming months.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we'll go to the next panelist or the next questioner. Sudha, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, in fact, it is Sudha's husband, Love Shilat, speaking. And first of all, I want to talk to what I've heard until now. It's very clear that Metrolinx is only pursuing option 3, and I'm joining this meeting under protest because this option hurts us, our families, and our future. Now, to the question, I've heard that if option 3 goes ahead, for some properties, you will need part of the property for permanent subsurface acquisition. This could adversely impact the rest of the property price significantly and very differently than if the whole property was expropriated. When will you disclose? Please provide details, not vague answers. When will you disclose all details as to how does Metrolinx approach such situations? Not vague answers. Even before you approach individual owners, so that we have the opportunity to bring up this matter in appropriate forum. Please do not give evasive answers. Provide clear disclosure information for us to take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudha. Over to you, panelists.
Yeah, so I'll start with this one and then pass it over to Lisa from our property team to follow on. So the first portion of the answer is, as I've mentioned, part of our PDBC, our preliminary design business case work, is to continue to sort of make small adjustments to the reference alignment for the purpose of maximizing the benefits and reducing the impacts. And so we have not yet established exactly which properties the subway will be traveling below. And so as a result, we haven't gone out to engage with those homeowners directly in having those sort of clear, concise sort of answers that you were looking for in your question there. So it's not as though we're providing sort of no detail or we're providing evasive answers. We're continuing to refine our work, and we haven't yet landed on sort of that exact alignment that will give us the ability to go out and deal with the directly affected homeowners. Second part of sort of the question is regarding the subsurface property interest. So for those private properties that the subway will be traveling below, yes, we are going to have to work with each one of those property owners to acquire sort of that permanent property interest for that subsurface land that the property owner owns. So Metrolinx needs to acquire that from the property owner. And that will be on a case-by-case basis with the property owners and sort of working through that transaction. And I guess the last part of the question is when will we be in a position to sort of disclose and begin engaging with those directly affected property owners? The timing for that will be towards the back end of this year. So we're going through our environmental assessment work, we're going through our preliminary design business case work, and really sort of finalizing and locking down that sort of route for the subway. And only after that will we know exactly which properties will be sort of going below and engaging with those property owners. And that will be towards the end of this year. And with that, I'll ask if Lisa sort of has any additional information she'd like to provide with respect to sort of the property acquisition process and sort of the timelines for engaging with the owner.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen. And Shoda, thank you so much for the question as well. So as soon as we have those property impacts, we will contact you or the affected property owners, and we'll do that, of course, at the earliest opportunity so we can answer any questions or address any concerns that the property owners may have. And our goal, of course, is to reach an amicable deal. Now, Metrolinx, we strive to minimize the number of properties that we impact and just acquire the properties that we need for the project. I also want to note too that even if we're acquiring a partial or the entire property, we will compensate the property owners at fair market value, and that will be determined by a third-party appraisal. And the report will be shared with the property owners, and of course Metrolinx always encourages property owners to obtain their own third-party appraisals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. The next person on our list is Dale. Dale, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Dale. My husband, Ian, we've been living here for 30 years, and I am now speechless. So I'm going to let Ian speak. Thank you.
I mean, honestly, you guys, some of these answers are very upsetting and they are evasive, but I'll go to my question or my comments. You had a softball thrown at you about the Yonge Street, Bloor Street noise and vibration. It was easy to answer. Yeah, that's ancient construction technique. But the Spadina extension, every mitigation technique that you have available, you've already used. And students that are in the Schulich lecture hall can hear the subway underneath the lecture hall every time it passes. Stephen Collins in the Richmond Hill presentation, now James, you have talked about measuring noise in the community and to establish, I guess, an ambient level that you'll work towards of what might be acceptable to us. The Ministry Environment's threshold is 35 decibels for noise and 70 decibels for vibration. How are you going to ensure that you don't exceed that? And in fact, what's your opinion about exceeding those, seeing that you're already exceeding those levels at the Schulich School of Business. That tunnel depth is 13 meters. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dale. Stephen, I'll ask you to start us off, and then perhaps the other panelists can jump in.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is ask Sam to sort of jump in here on this one. These are sort of very specific question about noise and vibration levels. And I think Sam can sort of start off with some of the observations that he's had on GTA network, any information he has on the Schulich sort of building and the Toronto and York Spadina subway extension that travels below that. And then and perhaps James Francis can talk about the thresholds that Metrolinx uses for ground-borne noise and vibration as part of our subway project. So Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and thanks Ian for the good question. I appreciate it. So the standards that you quoted, that is the 35 dBA for ground-borne noise and the 70 dB for vibration, which is about 0.1 millimeters per second, are the same standards that are applied to most provincial transit projects. So to answer that question first, yeah, we're using the same standards here as well. Interestingly enough, I did work on the Schulich, the TYSSC project, and we did take noise and vibration measurements within the building as well. In general, based on our measurements, the levels, the sound levels were below 35 dBA, and the vibration levels were well below 0.1 millimeters per second or 70 VDB. So that is an example of, I think, a vibration isolation system working quite well. And it wasn't exactly the sum total of our capabilities for vibration isolation. There are other technologies and other improvements possible to reduce the vibration levels even further. So it performed really well, and I think it performed as intended. And there are further possibilities available to us as well, further tools, if I will say. So I hope I've answered your question, Ian, but yeah, feel free to let us know if you have anything else, any further comments or questions.
Can I reply to that?
Sure.
Am I still on? Am I still on?
Yes, you are. You can go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a quick. So then why is a student feeling it in the lecture hall at those levels
in an institutional
institutional foundation? What are we to expect in a residential foundation? And again, I don't exactly understand what 13 meters means. I got this answer from Azim Ahmed that it was 13 meters on the Schulich. Are you measuring from the rail bed or you're measuring from the top of tunnel? Because there are different studies done. And one thing I read from Steve Monroe is that the measurement was from top of tunnel. Steve Monroe, transit critic, who you all know. So our relevant depth and our minimums that have been passed on to us is 17 meters. We feel that the top of tunnel to bottom of our basements, the effective depth is 11 meters. And in your study on the Spadina extension, 0 to 10 meters was a significant impact, and 10 to 25 meters was noticeable. We're talking about the effect on our homes, on the route, 360 times a day, every day of our lives. So I feel that the Schulich isn't really a completely relevant example. However, it's one of the only ones we have. And I agree with Lev that we are not being engaged with in a completely honest and open format.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing else from the panelists.
Yeah. Sam, just before we leave that, is there any thing you can provide about the difference between sort of an institutional sort of structure like Schulich and how noise and vibration moves through it versus residential properties that we're dealing with in the Royal Orchard community?
Yeah, we could share a little bit of information on that. So the Schulich condition is actually unique in the sense that the foundations are a lot deeper than your typical a low-rise residential building. So the actual structure of the Schulich building is potentially closer to the subway tunnel itself. So there is some kind of increased vibration transmission through the structure in those cases, as opposed to a typical low-rise home, which doesn't have very deep foundations. So that's one of the primary differences. The other aspect is it is really in terms of the acoustics. So, Schulich does have certain rooms that are quite don't have a lot of absorption. They're all concrete surfaces, noise bounces around, things like that. So a residential building, the inside or the acoustics of the room are typically a lot better than some of the institutional facilities where noise tends to echo and reverberate and things like that. So those are a couple of the main differences between Schulich and a typical building.
Sorry, final comment, please.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Final comment. So again, the noise and impact study on the Spadina extension quoted under low density townhouses and residences, 0 to 10 meters significant disruption, 10 to 25 meters noticeable. We're going from a zero noise impact on our homes to something in the range of significantly noticeable, let's say, because it's not going to be 25 meters, it's not going to be 10, but it's going to be awfully close to 11 or 12 or 13.
Great. All right, thank you so much. I just want to let everybody know that we're coming up to 8 o'clock. There's 4 minutes till 8 o'clock. We still have 16 questions on our roster here in the Zoom room. So what we'll do is we'll extend until 8:15, but that's as much as we can extend it to. So we might not get to everybody's question. So I would just remind everybody to please keep your questions short. Perhaps if you have follow-up questions, connect with us directly after the meeting. And as Azim said, we'll endeavor to respond to all remaining questions within 14 business days. So having said that, we have another question coming from John Guterman. Again, John has asked me to read his question, and it is the 20-foot distance between the top of the tunnel and lowest property sufficient to address vibration noise concerns? So this, again, kind of follows up on the question that we just had and addressed. Is there anything else to add on that point?
James or Sam, do you want to sort of reiterate what we've talked about in terms of the studies that we'll do and the mitigations that we'll be looking at?
Yep. If I could step in, James, sorry. To answer that question, yeah, we are completing our assessments and we are looking at both the impacts and potential mitigation measures. And one thing I'd like to reiterate is that these are kind of upper limits. They're like the limits. And so wherever possible, we are looking at ways to reduce the noise and vibration levels to below the limits. So think of them as kind of like an upper limit for our work. And we'll be back to you with details in terms of the impacts of potential mitigation measures and what you may expect going forward. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just to reiterate Sam's last point, I mean, as we're continuing to do our due diligence and our work, our plan is to come back to you and share more details and provide more prescriptive answers as we have more details to share. So we are committed to doing that.
Great, thank you so much. So our next person on the list is Rick. Rick, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, thanks very much. We've heard before that Mr. Verster indicated that Metrolinx would review alternative subway route options that met Bridge Station. So I know that there's a couple of options that are currently under review by Metrolinx. What I'm asking is that you take one of the best options and you look at either a below grade or slightly below grade station. And I believe you will find that both the vertical and horizontal alignments will be met. I believe it was earlier comments which suggested that the grades were an issue and that you would not meet an at-grade station. But if you go do the bridge station slightly below grade or underground, that addresses that particular issue. So I'd like to hear back on that. One last comment is that I raised my hand at 7:05, so it's almost an hour. A lot of people have been patiently waiting, so I think 15 minutes is not enough to hear people's comments. And in order to have an appropriate time frame to hear people's concerns, I would ask that all 12 or 13 questions that were people have patiently waited be addressed rather than cutting it off in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'll pose that to the panelists. Panelists, do you feel comfortable extending? And if I cut off the questions right now, we have 14 questions left.
Yeah, we can carry on.
Perfect, great. So with that, if there are any panelists that want to address Rick's question.
So I'll start. Rick, it sounds like sort of what you're asking is the route option that we looked at going below the Langstaff Gateway community and reaching Bridge Station. You're wondering about the potential of it being depressed or even underground. What we're trying to do through our work is to achieve that Bridge Station at grade. The reason being is it provides for shorter transfer distances between the bus services that are coming in on the upper level and the subway services on the lower level is sort of reason one. The second reason is the benefits associated with that station being at grade or below grade are the same. There's slightly higher benefits with it being at grade, but take that for what it is. When you put that station below grade, it dramatically changes the cost of that station, and it drives it up quite significantly to the point that it changes the ability for providing an additional station as part of the funding envelope that's been made available. So we've been identifying Bridge Station at grade as a key objective so that we can maximize the use of the funding that's being made available for the project.
I'd just like to point out that Mr. Verster also said that funding was not an issue, that it was more importantly that Bridge Station be met. I'm providing you with an option and an opportunity to that. I've also identified some saving measures that could be taken into consideration, and we could talk about that offline. What I am asking is that we look at, that Metrolinx look at a below grade or underground station at that particular location and to see if it's technically feasible.
Great.
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll take that away and speak to the technical.
Great. So we have another question here coming from Sam. Sam has asked that I ask the question. When will final decisions be made on stations, and when will work actually start? Will stations open in stages or all at once? And I'll leave that with the panelists.
So thank you for the question. So the decision on stations, we're studying the neighborhood station scope as part of our preliminary design business case work, and that work is scheduled for completion towards the end of this year. So we anticipate that a final decision on the neighborhood stations will be made in parallel to the work that we're doing on the preliminary design business case. As far as the start of construction, there's really two parts to that. I mentioned on the schedule slide earlier this evening that sort of our main project procurement is scheduled to start later this year, but sort of procuring or buying the contracting services for these bid projects can take a few years to go through. So the main contracts are scheduled to go to procurement this fall, with construction starting in late 2023 or early 2024. Having said that, I also mentioned that we have two early works projects. So these are small construction projects that are designed to sort of reduce the risk or sort of accelerate the delivery of the overall project and the big contracts that are going to come. Those smaller early works contracts are scheduled to start as early as spring next year. And those two are at Finch Station and up in the north end of the project in the Langstaff Gateway area.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Our next question comes from Nyla Van. I know Nyla Van had some concerns. She couldn't lift her hand up via Zoom room. So I hope she's still on the line. Nyla Van, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, this is Nila Van. So earlier I heard Stephen say that options 1 and 2 are both feasible, but that option 3 was chosen because it is supposed to maximize the benefits for Thornhill residents. I think I must respectfully disagree with that assessment, because option 3 means that more than likely we may or may not get a subway station at Royal Orchard. We may be lucky if we get one that's north of Steeles, between Steeles and Bridge Station. So this means that most residents living along Yonge Street, including the residents in Royal Orchard, will have to drive to the Langstaff or Bridge Station and park our cars. So that means that there's going to be more, you're not removing cars from the street. You're not making it convenient for people to walk to the station. So it's actually going to be worse for the environment. And this is in addition to all the pains that will come with construction in our neighborhood. So I guess this question is for Stephen. Can you tell us more specifically what benefits can current Thornhill residents expect from this project? I don't want generalities. I don't want benefits that will be focused on future residents, but can you share with us what we can hope to gain from this option 3 project?
So that's a really good question. So I don't think I said that our project is to maximize the benefits for Thornhill residents. What we are looking at doing, and I'll get to the specifics about the Thornhill residents in a minute, but I want to provide a little bit of context here. So, this is a major transit infrastructure investment that's being made to sort of provide another option for current residents to meet their mobility needs, and give all of the future residents the option to choose transit first as a way to organize their life around meeting their mobility needs. So when we take a look at the benefits of the project, it is looking at how will this benefit existing residents, meaning sort of what numbers of existing residents will choose to take the subway as opposed to sort of meet their mobility needs in the ways that they're currently meeting it. But it also really looks at all of the people who are going to be moving here, and we know that York Region is a key growth area. All of the people that are going to be moving here, how do we provide a transit solution that maximizes the use of the public investment in the transportation sector and gives those people a choice to orient their life around transit? So our project in developing our initial business case is looking at both the existing sort of population and employment distribution and the people and jobs that are there, and looking at those future people and jobs. The specific benefits for, I'll say, the Thornhill community, the broader Thornhill community, we really need to come to a decision on the neighborhood stations to really set out what the benefits are going to be for the community. In the absence of any additional stations, being planned as part of the project, there is the option for all of those existing Thornhill residents to get on the subway service earlier than they would normally get on at Finch Station. So you're able to get on the subway service earlier, which reduces the total travel time that you would be experiencing to meet your daily trips. So Well, the station placement is incredibly important for identifying what those specific benefits are going to be for the Thornhill community. And that decision is critical to be able to directly answer that question in a sort of a quantified way. In the absence of those stations, the subway project as proposed through the option 3 refinement does give the opportunity to get on the subway service earlier than what would normally happen, and that's Finch Station.
Thanks so much, Stephen. We're going to go to the next question and keep this moving because we do still have quite a number of people. Enid, you're next. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
The question is, do you know yet approximately where the subway goes from the west side of Yonge to the east side of Yonge? And my concern is that there is another active historic cemetery right there at Royal Orchard. I don't know whether you're aware that it's even there.
Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, so the quick answer to that question is we sort of are fully aware of the Thornhill Baptist Church, and that is sort of a cemetery that's associated with the Thornhill United Church.
No, it's the Anglican
so it's not Thornhill United, Holy Trinity Church. And we are not traveling sort of on that church or cemetery property with our reference alignment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. Our next questioner is Jack. Jack, go ahead and unmute yourself. Jack, are you there? All right, we'll go to the next person. Lav, you're up.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Earlier I heard Stephen say that when Metrolinx proposed option 3 to the MTO, the Ministry of Transport, Metrolinx also discussed option 1 and 2 at the time. The question is, how can we access the documents that show that Metrolinx shared alternative proposals with benefits and impacts with the provincial government? How can we access the documents from you, not from the province, not under FIPA and the like, but how can we get the documents from you? When you meet with the government, you absolutely make notes and the like. So how do we access those?
Analysts, over to you.
Yeah, so in answer to that question, sort of the documentation and the information we would have shared is that which is included in our initial business case and the supplementary analysis. That is really the compendium of the work that we've done and the information that we presented to our colleagues at the Ministry of Transportation.
Great, thanks so much, Stephen. Lav, I know you have another question, but I'm going to move through the list, and if we do have a little bit more time at the end, I might call on you again. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move us along. Caitlin, you're next. Please unmute yourself. No, Caitlin. All right, we'll go to the next person, Nama.
Hi, I kind of had the same question that Nilavan had regarding the benefits for Thornhill. And Stephen, you blew my mind away when after all the meetings that we had, you're saying that you did not mean the benefits for Thornhill community in any way when you're talking about consultation with the community, working together, making sure that we are taken care of. And right now you're saying that Thornhill and Markham, it's not even about any benefits for us, unless maybe, probably not getting a subway at Royal Orchard. And if we don't get that, we're getting a full-on colonoscopy with no benefits. And I'm so upset and I'm appalled, and you're ignoring my intelligence as well as everybody else's.
Analyst.
I'm deeply sorry for leaving you with that impression that was not reflecting and commenting on the benefits of the project to the Thornhill community. There are benefits to the Thornhill community of the project, but I was specifically mentioning that the station decision is important to be able to fully answer the question of what the full suite of benefits would be for the Thornhill community, which is the specific question that I was trying to answer. We are deeply committed to listening to the concerns of the Royal Orchard community and the broader Thornhill community, taking those into consideration as we're doing our background and our investigation work, as James Francis has mentioned, and trying our best to work through the impacts and mitigating those impacts. We will continue to share information as it becomes available to us through those studies that James Francis has mentioned, and hopefully continue to work with the Royal Orchard community. And I am sorry for leaving you with the impression that we're not sort of thinking about the benefits to the Thornhill and the Royal Orchard community, because we absolutely are.
No, but you just said that it's not, it's for the future, it's for Richmond Hill. The only benefit you gave me is that I can get on the subway at Steeles and I don't have to go all the way to Finch. That's the only, I want to know one benefit, only one, Stephen. I don't want a long answer. I want one benefit that it's going to give me, that you're going to dig a subway under my basement, that I'm going to feel and hear every single day for 390 times. I don't want a lot. I want one benefit other than the fact that I can get on the subway at Steeles versus going to Finch. I'll walk to the subway. I want to know one benefit, please, one. Not a long question, one benefit.
It is that. It's closer access to the subway service.
All right.
The other aspect, the other aspect to it that we need to keep in mind here is sort of with the growth that's happening in York Region, the subway as a service is vital to sort of managing the overall demand for transportation service. And we've talked about in the benefits side of the Yonge subway as relieving some of the vehicle kilometers that are traveled on the road network. And so while we're taking vehicles off of the road by building the subway, that will provide sort of management of congestion that we're all experiencing in Southern York Region.
All right, thank you, Stephen. I'm going to move us along. Next questioner, Bob Aurora. Bob, please unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. Question is, based on either your experience or your background knowledge, how many projects that Metrolinx has put forward as, quote, the best business case have been overturned based on negative community reaction to the plan? And my second part, again, based on your experience or knowledge, what would you recommend to Royal Orchard residents as a successful game plan to stop option 3, given that you are neutral on the final option?
Panelists, over to you.
Yeah, I'll take the first part of that. I don't have any knowledge of business cases that Metrolinx has done that have sort of been overturned. I would sort of defer to my other colleagues on the call here to sort of cast out to them if they've got any sort of knowledge or information on that one.
Maybe I can just provide, I don't know that I have any specific answer to that question on the number of proposals, but you know, one of our focuses as a transit agency is to put forward recommendations and options for informed decision making. And we're always looking for opportunities to refine and improve our plans. And this includes our ongoing conversations that we're going to have with community members that we're having and government partners about the road ahead. So the projects that we move forward with are an evolution of those conversations. And you know, there are many decisions that arise over time. We have, you know, committed to or remain committed to working with communities and all levels of government to move this project forward in the best way possible. I'm not sure if any other panelist has any other feedback that they could provide on previous proposals.
Well, perhaps the second part of my question, what would you recommend to me earnestly if you wanted to stop option 3? What would be my best game plan?
Continue to provide your feedback, input, and advice. We're making ourselves available. We'll continue to make ourselves available. We're going to continue to take your feedback. It's going to be part of our decision making as we move forward. We want to hear from you. And we are hearing from you. We're actively listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Raj. And just a reminder, please, let's keep our questions to one question, no rebuttals. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. So I'm going to go to the next person, Eddie. Eddie, go ahead. Eddie? No Eddie. All right. We'll go to Jordan then. Jordan, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, my question was already answered, so I'll pass on.
Okay, perfect. The next person is Gary. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I appreciate the great opportunity for everyone to speak now, but it's really important that now that the historic federal funding has been secured, it's important that the route is in the best interest of the residents. The federal funding agreement requires an engagement process that enables every community involvement, inclusive of local communities and diverse voices, and opportunities to access decision makers and influence decisions. It's great consultation, but please listen and act on the comments made. Very important, not just listen, but act. Additionally, there needs to be a consultation of location and development up and down the entire route, especially at Yonge and Steeles, the major hub, what's going to be on the Vaughan side, the Markham side, and in Toronto. I'll also advocate to ensure that inclusive community consultation process for this project will address neighborhood and community improvements and ensure that this project fulfills its remarkable potential to make life better for Thornhill families. We know that the funding now that came from the federal government to allow it to continue, but the route is the responsibility of Metrolinx and the province. And I'll just reiterate 1,000 times, listen and act to what the community is saying. Thank you, and keep up the great work.
Great, thank you, Gary. Was there a question in there, or did we want to move on?
I just want to make sure that the committee, I'm sorry, that Metrolinx will not only be listening, but will be acting on.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Gary. We'll take that back. Joanna, you're next.
Hi. This just in the interest of full disclosure, I was involved in the original environmental assessment for the project back in the mid 2000s. I have to confess I was quite surprised at the new alignment, option 3, and I have a question about the depth of the subway as a result of that new alignment. And the impact on the two intermediate stations at Clark and Royal Orchard. I would expect that the subway depth is quite significantly deeper than the original alignment. And I want to know if that's certainly going to drive up the costs of Clark and Royal Orchard Station, and what the likelihood is that now that with those costs increasing, that one or both of those stations would be eliminated.
One will be.
Over to the panelists.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I'll start, and perhaps Charlie can sort of supplement with some of the technical details around the profile or the elevation of the subway. In sort of general terms, the alignment, both the horizontal and vertical through Clark Avenue, is sort of essentially held the same from the work that was done previously through the EA process. So there's not a lot of change at Clark. For Royal Orchard, the biggest change that we've made is we identified an opportunity to save a fairly significant amount of money by tunneling below the East Don River as opposed to bridging over top of the East Don River. And what that's done is it's kept our subway in the tunnels below the water course. And yes, The station at Royal Orchard is deeper than a conventional station, but it's sort of not deep. Well, it's on the range of deep stations compared to other deep stations within the GTA network. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie just to provide some additional technical detail around the sort of profile and the Royal Orchard station.
Correct. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the question. So the actual profile is considerably deeper, as Stephen mentioned, going underneath the Don River, and we're currently looking at a depth approximately perhaps around 10 meters below the river depth. So we're obviously studying geotechnical and soil conditions, but at this time there's various ways to construct Royal Orchard Station, and Royal Orchard Station actually is the deepest station of the line, and that's something that we're looking at various construction technologies, and some of them include the let's say SEM mining of that station to minimize disruptions at grade and minimize impacts on the surface area, because we're actually going to be under. And then once we pass Royal Orchard, it goes back up and following the grades, and the area will be a little bit shallower. Having said that, it still needs to go underneath the next water course. So we're trying to figure out the best alignment as we go through the final geotechnical and due diligence works we're doing. So hopefully we can get back to the rest of the team of where we are later on the year. Hopefully that answers the question. Anything else I missed, Stephen, though?
Yeah, just I want to sort of maybe sort of clarify. So, Royal Orchard Station is sort of a deep station because of tunneling below the East Don River. But what that does is it creates the opportunity for keeping the subway quite deep below the Royal Orchard community. And that's one of the changes that we made between the original option 3 and what is now our reference alignment. We identified that being deeper below the community will further mitigate noise and vibration. And there is a benefit from being deep to be able to reduce those noise and vibration levels, but it also is sort of driven down by the Royal Orchard Station being at that greater depth than normal.
Yeah, and just to highlight that, in our initial geotech review, there's actually rock pretty close to that area where we're heading. So the deeper and also the deeper station as well as the rock will actually help protect the vibration as well. So we're looking at the depths to obviously minimize impact on the surface, especially the Royal Orchard community area, as we finalize our alignment.
Thanks so much, Charlie and Stephen. We're going to move on to Marty Rosen. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Yes. Hello. We know that Toronto doesn't want the extension to proceed until till the Ontario line is in service. That's because of overcrowding and overcapacity on the current Yonge line. So my question is, what are your projections for trains southbound coming into Steeles, Finch, Shepherd during peak periods? What kind of capacity or overcapacity will riders be facing at those stations?
Stephen, perhaps I'll ask you to respond to that one.
Yeah, and maybe I'll ask Devin Horn as our manager of project planning to sort of talk about the ridership levels. Devin, is that something that you can provide some insight on?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, happy to talk about it at a high level. I guess, yeah, you're absolutely correct. The Ontario line needs to be in service prior to the Yonge North subway extension in terms of that opening date. That being said, these will be, likely under construction, of course, in parallel, and we're talking about an in-service time. So the pinch points, of course, currently are at Yonge and Bloor, and what we're seeing the Ontario line do, of course, is to provide that extra capacity to the Yonge line all the way up to all the way up to Eglinton, and it's also going to help to relieve Eglinton. We're already predicting Eglinton, with the opening of the crosstown, to be quite a busy station at Yonge and Eglinton. So the Ontario line will assist with that as well. In terms of sort of the further north up the line, what we're seeing is congestion happening at a higher level further north, but we're not anticipating issues that far north upon the opening day. We're building in capacity to have this line be comfortable and usable for the foreseeable future.
Thanks so much, Devin. All right, we're going to go to the next person, Nader. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question. I have just a quick question about the funding. Like in most of the countries, they use the benefit of making the project like this in scale by selling, the permits to the developer or whatever. It's just initiative things that I am pointing out. For example, is there anything in the project that you intend to make money instead of paying by the front pocket of the people for the project, like the funding, making, some money from project by itself?
Over to the panelists.
Yeah, so there's two parts to how I'll answer the question. So, what is being sort of made available to the project to sort of fund the scope elements that we're looking at building, so the tunnels, the stations, and sort of the other pieces, is the $5.6 billion. So that's the funding that's being made available, or the money that's being made available to the project. That's being contributed between the regional level of government, the provincial level of government, and the federal level of government. So that's on the funding side. What you're getting at in your question is sort of what are the opportunities that are going to be looked at to try and sort of recover some of that sort of public investment. And the one thing that I'll sort of direct you to is what's referred to as the Provincial Transit-Oriented Communities Program. There's a fair bit of information available online relative to the Provincial Transit-Oriented Communities Program. And I think that's getting to sort of the root of the question that you're asking, is how can the public sector, or how can the people sort of gain an advantage from the significant public investment that's being made. And what I'll refer you to is sort of all of the public information that's available if you go and do a search for Province of Ontario Transit-Oriented Communities Program.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go to Gina next. Gina, go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Hi there. Okay.
Hello.
So my question is, I sort of even joined this conversation because I thought it was a democratic process where the people living in the area can have a say about what you're doing. But listening to you so far, it seems like it's more of a dictatorship. So you've given us option 1, 2, 3, but you're saying I'm choosing 3, deal with it. It doesn't seem to me, from what I've gathered so far from the conversation, that we are here to help you make the choice. You've already made the choice and you're presenting it to us. That's what I'm gathering from the conversations that we are having. It's not a process where you're giving us the choice to vote on these choices that you've given us. You're just saying you're choosing 3, and people are just showing you their displeasure about the choices you're making, but it doesn't seem to me that you're listening actually. So it looks like we are here wasting our time talking to you. It's fruitless. It's not going anywhere. So can you sort of say something or sort of reassure us so that we can know we are not wasting our time by sitting here for 2 hours talking to you and that what we're saying is being heard.
Analyst, over to you.
Yeah, I'll start, and I know Raj will have some feedback here as well. This is absolutely not a waste of time. All of your questions were sort of listening to carefully. Some of the answers that we have available with the information that we have available to date is sort of, resulting in some of the answers not being sort of fully formed answers that would sort of meet your expectation. But this is an important sort of investment of time for both ourselves and the community. And so you're definitely not wasting your time here. And I'll ask Raj just to sort of maybe provide some additional comments about the importance of this engagement and sort of communication process that we're in.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, and thanks for that question. Really important question. And as Stephen has already mentioned, that community input is truly essential to the work that we're doing, and we are grateful for your input. We are listening. We are actually tracking every comment that's coming in as part of our public registry. And as we go through the EPR process, we'll be capturing that information as well. As part of the presentation today, Stephen had mentioned that we are forming community liaison committees. We're starting with the Royal Orchard community. So that's going to be more smaller groups where we can have more one-to-one conversations. We have reached out to the Royal Orchard Ratepayers Association. Councillor Irish has also agreed to sit with us, and Stop Option 3 Steering Committee. We've reached out to provide some names. We will be getting that underway in the next couple of weeks. We'll have these detailed conversations. We'll continue to have these virtual open houses. Azim and the community relations team are quite active in the community. We are available taking questions in between all of these sessions that we have. We want to hear from you, whether it's through these means, writing in. We are accessible to you. And as Stephen said, this is not a waste of time. Absolutely not. The input that you're providing us is helping us to, in the decision-making process on refinements. And we take your comments and feedback seriously. And please be assured that that's the case.
Thanks so much, Raj. All right, we're going to go to our last person on the list, and then we're going to go back to Azim after this. Fahim, go ahead. You're up.
Hello. Hi, can you guys hear me? Hi.
Yep.
So I wanted to start out. So I basically currently live in Toronto, but work in York region. So this will affect me. And I wanted to say that I just want to start with a comment. Removing either Clark or Commerce Station is going to have a negative impact on many residents living in the area, right? Because there will be reduced bus service as a result. So even though we might be able to get to Steele Station faster if for working in York region, right? There will be less buses in the area to be able to take us there, right? So that's going to be it might even take longer to get to a subway station because of the reduced bus service to be able to take us there. Right? So please do understand the high level of importance in building both Comer and Clark Station, especially as federal funding does come in, right? Because there will be reduced bus service, and with that, there will be a huge gap for walking distance between the station if the bus service is going to be very infrequent as a result. So my question now is there a chance that both Comer and Clark stations will be built? And if not, which one is Metrolinx currently leaning towards?
Panelists, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and I'll start, and maybe Devin can provide some additional information on the planning side. So a couple of things I just want to provide some context at the beginning. So the available funding for the project at $5.6 billion is the combination of the regional, the provincial, and the federal funding. So again, there isn't sort of any new money that is being made available to the project above the $5.6 billion. And what all of our analysis has showed us is that on our reference alignment, the option sort of 3 reference alignment, up to 4 stations can be accommodated within the $5.6 billion or the funding that's been made available. And so what we've identified is the 3 stations that are in scope, with the 3 neighborhood stations still under analysis. And sort of Metrolinx has not sort of developed an opinion or a position on sort of which station is preferred or should be recommended. Our analysis is ongoing, and what we are doing is assembling the transit economic benefits associated with each of those 3 neighborhood stations. And so I provide sort of the context at the beginning just to sort of make the point that the project as originally conceived, the project that is effectively the option 1 that goes up Yonge Street with stations at Cummer, Steeles, Clark, Royal Orchard, Langstaff, and Richmond Hill Centre, that project does not fit within the $5.6 billion funding envelope. That alignment can only accommodate 3 stations within the available funding. So it will take new funding in order to provide sort of stations beyond those 3 along the original project alignment. And what we're saying is the benefits associated with our bridge station are really driving the business case for our project and creating that convergence of the rapid transit services.
So is it possible to possibly request more money for the additional station, given the public consultations and given the popularity with them? Is it possible for Metrolinx to talk to the government and say, hey, we're getting this feedback, and we're really getting this feedback to have both stations, Clark and Cummer, not just one? So please consider providing more money, because this is very, very important to the people living in both in York Region and in Toronto. Is it please possible to, consider doing this with the Ontario government? Because it is a $5.6 billion project, and for $500 million losing out on a station it's like yeah. So is it possible to please request that?
Yeah, it's understood, and sort of that's a common theme that we've been hearing in our consultation and engagement. So that is sort of a message that's been received. At this point in time, the specific direction to Metrolinx is to find the highest benefits within sort of the funding that's being made available to the project, and that is the $5.6 billion. But I do know that sort of the message is being heard loud and clear, the importance to communities along the corridor at each of those 3 neighborhood stations. And it's not just one or another, it's all 3 have been identified as being important for the communities.
But is it possible for Metrolinx to convey that to the Ontario government and make that known to the Ontario government, that what you just said? That's my question.
Yeah, as we debrief with our colleagues at MTO, sort of we'll be providing this type of information to them, the importance to the communities of each of the stations.
So hopefully
Perfect.
they can use that envelope. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So with that, we've come to our last question and the end of our question period. So I'd like to really thank everybody who asked their live questions. This is essentially exactly what we want to see and hear as part of our engagement. And we want to thank you all for bringing your passion for your neighborhoods to this discussion. So again, this is not the end of our engagement with you, it's just the beginning. And with that, I'm going to punt it over back to Azim.
Thanks, Jackie. And thank you to everyone, both on the Engage page, as well as in the Zoom room and on the panel. So we do understand the frustration, but do know that, as Stephen mentioned, this is an important investment of our time. So we value your input, and the input that you are providing is very important. And to Raj's point, we look forward to having those smaller group conversations with all of you in the weeks and months ahead. So your interest, your passion, and continuing to challenge us is something we welcome to ensure that we're doing work well. So before we close, we mentioned all unanswered questions will be answered in written format within 14 business days with the link that we sent to you. So with that, we hope you have a safe evening, and thank you again for joining us. Take care.